Imagine, demand, and build a world transformed.
Good evening. Welcome to TWT 2020 session on the left and the anti-digital movement. My name is Dan Lewis, and I am one of the organizers of the World Transformed. Also well known for when people are talking about how we strategize around an issue, for shouting out digital, because I believe that the now, the future, and what we do is digital. Now, before we get started, I just need to run through a few quick little housekeeping rules. So in regards to our general rules of engagement, we want everyone to feel welcome in these spaces and for everyone's voices to be heard. So please bear this in mind when engaging with chat or comment boxes during sessions. Please don't use inappropriate, rude or unkind language, and please don't spam. Participants who violate these principles may be prevented from further posting in the chat or comment box. Also, in this session, we will be using a live transcription service called Otter. Attendees using Otter will have to follow a link and open the transcript as a separate window. The link will be shared in the chat box by a tech volunteer. Thank you, Mark, for all your hard work, and Rory. And if you are having difficulties, please message the tech volunteer on the chat. Also, big shout out to our supporters network. TWT is free for all, but is only made possible by the contributions of our supporters. If you are able to, please consider supporting us at theworldtransformed.org/support. And I'm sure Mark will be posting that in the chat throughout tonight's call. And I hope that as many of you as possible will click the link and become a supporter just like me. And that will help sustain our work all year round, which you can find more information about on the website, theworldtransformed.org. Now, moving into the session, I remember when I was born, I don't remember when I was born, but when I was young, a computer in every home was a dream. Mobile communications were for sci-fi, and the TV was the closest thing to a video call that we'd ever imagine at that time. 30 years later, yeah, I'm 30 now, it's mad. And I can order any meal I want from a slab of glass in my hand, that being an iPhone or whatever phone it is that I might want to use. My 9-year-old daughter chats with friends and family around the world on a tablet, sometimes in a digital world called Roblox that I still struggle to understand. And I like to think myself as a techie. The digital revolution is said to be upon us. I believe it's rushing by and leaving too many of us behind. Not always through our own faults, but because of our reaction to change. And from our homes to workplaces, digital is taking over. Keeping an eye on your own house while you're not there, taking on the low-skilled jobs that come with low pay and improving our day-to-day lives. But how do we react to this? How do we make sure we're not left behind? And most importantly, how do we make sure we're in control? Our world leaders don't understand technology, and they've proven this time and time again. We should be using this to our advantage, building our movement and outsmarting them in all we do. From digital voting to digital organizing, we need to think more about how we use digital in everything that we do on the left. And today we're talking about exactly this. And we have two very special guests who have joined us to talk about these things and some of the work they've been involved with around these specific issues. First of all is Gemma Copeland, who is a digital designer and member of Common Knowledge, a not-for-profit worker cooperative that builds digital tools for and with grassroots activists. She is also a part of the Designers and Cultural Workers branch of United Voices of the World. Big up the man them and gal them out there. So also we have Edward Superior, who is the Dean of the London College of Political Technology, which studies emerging communities of practice in the public sector and civil society. Now, I've spoken way too much for my daughter's liking on the internet, and considering this is on YouTube, she's definitely going to see it and she'll appreciate me shutting up. So I'm going to pass over to Gemma, who's going to talk about some of the work that she's been involved in. And yeah, I'll let you take it away, Gemma. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, so I'm mainly going to be talking about my work as part of the co-op Common Knowledge. So we're a not-for-profit worker co-op of 4 members. The worker co-op bit means we're like a company democratically owned and run by ourselves. And the not-for-profit bit means that like any surplus that we make from projects goes towards solidarity work with activists. So what we're focused on is really like enabling people to self-organize, and specifically kind of through digital means. So we try to increase the capacity of different activist groups by designing and building digital tools. We try to be kind of less about electoral politics and more about like grassroots organizing and empowering people to kind of make change in their own lives directly. So we've been going for, well, it's a couple of years now. And we try to really kind of form ongoing partnerships with different groups and like kind of see each project that we work on as like a close collaboration as well. So we've worked with people like Momentum, The World Transformed also, London Renters Union, Nurses United, United Voices of the World, and Progressive International. We also do things like contribute to research projects. So for example, we contributed to the Labour Together review of the 2019 general election. And in that, like, we kind of researched like how the Labour Party used digital technologies, how they attempted to kind of bring in community organizing and their general like organizational structures. In general, in the work that we do, we kind of try to look for like patterns and shared needs that different people have and like where there's common ground, with the idea being like the more that we can kind of generalize and share amongst the wider movement, the more kind of change we can help come about, I guess. So in terms of thinking about like today's topic and how we see digital technology in like, and the left and within politics, I guess kind of crucially, we see technology as like an enabler of organizing tactics, not a replacement. So we always try, like when we start a project, we try to understand like, okay, what is the wider context? Like, what is the theory of change? And I guess partially because of like how we're structured, being like a worker co-op and trying to like exist as much as we can outside of capitalism, we don't want to just like build things for the sake of it. We actually want to like help people achieve political change. So we try to really like avoid making digital design decisions based on like our own assumptions, and instead really like begin with research, talk to the groups, understand the organization, what they're doing, and also understand the kind of people that they're talking to. And, you know, we also like to do lots of testing, so kind of creating lightweight prototypes, iterating quickly, like making sure that there are lots of moments for reflection. I guess one of the main things that we've found, like these approaches that I've just kind of listed are actually pretty standard in the tech world, often called like agile. But within activism, it's maybe a bit of kind of a new approach. And what we've found is with all these different projects that we work on, there's kind of some element of like training the people that we're working with and like, I guess, helping them change their mindset a little about like, I guess, their overarching strategy and how technology fits in as an element of that. So it's about kind of looking at like the mindset, the different processes you have to use, and then the digital tools in kind of that order. In general, what we found is like people are really open to this and really up for like learning as much as possible, which is super cool. I guess another thing that we talk about a lot is like the confusion maybe between different types of activism, which we think is kind of accelerated by digital technology, particularly like social media platforms. So we find that like sometimes like because of social media and what it kind of requires you to do like being always online and always kind of having statements to make, move very quickly, and like, you know, interacting in the feed where all this different content is mashed up, like, and you don't really know what's real or not. That there can be kind of a confusion between like what is communication, what is mobilizing, and like what is actually organizing. And in general, we try to like steer the focus towards like organizing rather than just like mobilizing like a mass of people to go and like click, smash that like. Because yeah, generally like we don't want to achieve collectivism. We want to like achieve real change. So yeah, and I think this is like, you know, avoiding collectivism is even more of a important thing right now. Because it's harder now to kind of protest and to gather safely, etc. So we really have to start thinking about these digital spaces as like a place where politics happens rather than like a place where people just go and rant about politics. And I guess the change in mindset here is maybe a bit like, it's about thinking slower and more long-term and more structural and kind of like, yeah, building power, training people, giving people the tools to do it themselves. So in terms of like, I guess our own experience in like introducing technology to political activists, sometimes it can be difficult. I think that's not limited to, you know, the political sphere. I think any organization, if you're trying to adopt a new technology, it's really hard. A lot of the time, like people have had bad experiences in the past, which is like understandable, or they may be like really skeptical about how much tech will help them. One of the, I guess, interesting things about coronavirus is that it's forced people to go to these spaces more, to use these tools. Like they haven't had the choice and have had to quickly kind of learn new techniques, new tools, etc. Which can be sometimes very awkward. It's definitely exhausting. We're really sick of Zoom, all of us, I'm sure. And I guess what we're finding is that, well, we kind of encourage people to apply the same techniques that they'd use in real life as they do like in digital spaces, but there's also something that's always a bit like hard to recreate. I guess the other thing that we've noticed is like a lot of the time political organizers' experience of technology is that it is like an exhausting and frustrating task, often because they're kind of wrangling huge spreadsheets. And there's a lot of work that's done that's very tedious that could actually be kind of like automated, which is something that like computers are really, really good at. But instead you have activists kind of like wasting all their energy and kind of like fitting together, you know, tools that were intended just for consumer use and paid for by data harvesting, but they're trying to like use them for left-wing political organizing. And then I guess the final thing is, I guess there's something around digital literacy as well. Like often there's kind of this like, there's not that much knowledge about how technology works. And so people tend to like not want to deal with it. Whereas there's lots of stuff that like, there shouldn't like be kind of like, oh, developers are gatekeepers to digital technology. So yeah, we try to like also increase digital literacy generally, and other people that kind of we collaborate with or like are in our same co-working space, Space 4, like founders and coders. They're doing like really, really good work and kind of, you know, teaching more people, like a wider group of people to actually be able to use tech. So yeah, I guess in conclusion, like with all these things, like the main thing that we've really learned is like, there's not much point building digital solutions. You actually need to kind of talk to the organizers themselves and kind of look at like how you can kind of change the, like create a cultural shift within the organization before you can, yeah, really start changing things.
Sorry, I was just taking notes from everything you were saying. That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Gemma. What we'll do is we'll come back to some more questions about some of the stuff you said, and also talking specifically about the movement. And how we can change that culture. Really interesting what you said at the end there about don't just build the digital solutions. What we need to look at is changing the culture. And I think that's a massive part is the culture. You've hit the nail on the head there. So what we'll do is we'll just pass over to Ed. I love your title, Dean of the London College of Political Technology. Take it away, my friends.
Hey, everyone. Can you hear me fine?
Fantastic.
Okay, great. So I'm Ed Superior, Dean of the London College of Political Technology. I'm going to talk briefly about who I am, and then I will talk about the existing technology landscape and how that, the implications that has for politics. And then I'll talk a bit about the structure of the labor movement and the implications that has for this. And then finally, I'll talk about what, sort of you as an individual who's shown up to this can do, particularly because you're likely to be along the more savvy end if you've managed to find your way here. So first of all, I've been studying governance and technology for about 10 years now, and wow, what a 10 years it's been. A lot has happened. I mean, frankly, what an amazing 6 months and 1 year and 2 years and 3 years it's been. It's really an amazing field where a lot is happening. What have I done? So I've run Wikipedia's largest ever event, its Global Summit in 2014. And I was head of community strategy for the Green Party in 2015. And then in 2015, I founded this institute really to study this field, which was just sort of starting up in this way. And that's been running for 5 years. We've hosted thousands of civic communities. So we sort of look at civic communities. We look at communities of civil servants, communities of journalists, communities of activists as well, and so on, and see how technology is changing the things that they do. I've probably studied 1,000 different communities now, and online and in person. And I've seen some surprising things, I have to say. And really, the biggest thing to take away is in many ways, like the whole structure of how society is built is sort of changing in lots and lots of small ways at the same time. And these taken together can have some surprising outcomes. And I think if you look at the news, you will see that is true. So the first part of this is sort of what's the existing technology landscape, and what does that mean for politics? More or less, I would say the most important, besides the internet itself, the most important technology that we've produced is this, and this is really changing the way that people sort of interact with the world. Nowadays, the vast majority of people are not just humans, but they're humans who are connected. So they can message anyone that they have ever known, and they can look up anything they like, and they can also find things to get angry about. The sad thing about this and all of the software that lives on it most of the time is it's a sort of venture capital funded, capitalist, output. And then, in some ways there are some good things about this, because of the sort of creative, destructive nature of capitalism. The quality of the sort of the software is very good, and also because of both venture capital and also ad-supported models, things tend to be cheap or free for the most part. I think most of the software that you're using right now, you didn't pay for, which is great, and it allows lots and lots of people to use software that they otherwise couldn't afford if they were paying the true price. And this, is certainly true in this country, and is very, very true in other countries where where they would absolutely have no access to this at all. But obviously, this comes with downsides, and that primarily is the fact that a lot of the software is designed for extraction. So I think a lot of people, hopefully you may have heard of, some can become quite mainstream, is this idea of, Facebook's algorithm. Almost everyone in the world somehow uses Facebook, and they scroll in their feeds, and the feeds are purely there just to try and keep them looking at ads as much as possible. And it turns out that a side effect of this, or rather the best way to do this, is to show them things that are kind of annoying. And things that are annoying turn out to be political polarization. And somehow a side effect, it has contributed to the polarization of politics sort of globally. one little thing that I've been looking at is, I think this sort of idea about Facebook being suspect is relatively mainstream now, and people are starting to be sort of skeptical of it at a sort of societal level. But nobody has started thinking about, for example, dating apps, which also have algorithms, which are also not necessarily working in the user's best interest. And I have a theory that perhaps in 100 years we'll look back and think that maybe the widespread proliferation of dating apps with algorithms that are not well scrutinized, maybe sort of the more significant thing that comes out of this time. So that's the downside of sort of VC funded, venture capital funded technology. And to contrast that, you can talk about kind of maybe anti-capitalist technology, which of which there is not that much, but some. Really sort of the original foundations of the web are anti-capitalist. Sort of produced by academics as sort of public projects, which is why we can all use email and we can all use websites sort of without paying to go there somehow. And these are good examples of sort of open source, open licensed infrastructure. And things like this do exist, and are produced. And the downside is, because they don't have this massive investment, access to investment that commercial software has, they tend to be, either very, very expensive, or in practice, don't exist at all, or are very primitive. However, there are some really, sort of outstanding examples. For me, I think Wikipedia is one of the best examples of, sort of public interest technology, a sort of public interest technology project, and something which I hope you'll be familiar with. But some other examples are Who Targets Me, which is a nice sort of counterpart to Facebook. So that was a project that was in fact launched in this very room in Newspeak House. And what it does is it's something you can install in your browser, and it will track political advertising that you're being shown and aggregate it to sort of make Facebook's political targeting more transparent. And another example is Mastodon, which has also come out of this community, which is sort of a open source Twitter, kind of Twitter-like piece of software, which where you sort of own your own data, and it's federated. It's a federated system, so people can set up their own servers and have their own communities rather than depend on one company in America, across the sea, determining what can be written or not. We're a very interesting time in terms of this technology landscape, because while or rather, we're starting to see sort of sovereign interests and technology splitting off into the kind of sort of American internet, and then sort of the Chinese internet and the European internet, and then they're having like different sort of regulatory environments which are causing sort of national scale conflicts. We can see. An example would be Huawei is sort of not allowed, and also the sort of sale of TikTok as well. But anyway, so we're sort of a very interesting time where things are changing very fast. But the downside is, most of the technology we use most of the time is sort of capitalist fundamentally. So that's where we are. In terms of the labor movement, I think I spend quite a lot of time advising lots and lots of different kinds of people who are trying to make the world better, about how so what they can do, or rather how their organization can adapt to a digital age. And I think the key thing to realize here is no matter where whatever sort of COP you're part of or whatever, the movement as a whole is made up of a lot of different organizations of different kinds. And this goes further than just the party, and is more than just about campaigning. And these organizations are all allies, more or less. So, we're talking about the sort of ecosystem of unions. We're talking about the ecosystem of charities. There's hundreds of thousands of charities, organizations that provide legal aid, universities, citizens advice bureaus, public libraries, MPs' offices, local councils to some extent, and then also, councillors, organizations that are co-ops, the media, or at least some of it, and even, very strongly parts of the civil service. So, parts of the civil service that are really upholding transparency and sort of openness and acting on consultations are really somehow your friends. And when it comes to technology, this is important to take into account. And this is happening not just in this country, but also abroad. All of these organizations are sort of changing. A lot of them were set up a long time ago, certainly before the internet was mainstream, and were really set up with the restrictions of paper. Fundamentally, what a lot of these organizations do is they move information around, and that used to be a lot harder than it is now. And the consequence of that is shown in the design of these organizations. So we're sort of undergoing a shift where a lot of the way that these organizations work is sort of changing quite a lot, and that's pretty painful. But we're starting to see some nice outcomes, I think, but it will take time. And I think, it's important to see the Labour Party is just a part of this shift. So somehow sort of situational awareness is the most key thing. So, for example, you may find that one of these organizations is suddenly releasing data or information that it didn't release before, or that you can access, or offers a service, or allows you to access to whatever talent help in a way that was not available before. And obviously, because part of this is about technology, it may be one that's sort of distant. So somehow keeping a track of this is sort of the hard part. An ongoing project in this, the sort of political technology community is mapping all of these organizations and what they're doing. Increasingly, we have good tools to do this. So, for example, a Newspeak House produced a project called CharityBase.uk, which is a open searchable database of all charities, and it gives you what their missions are, and who their trustees are, and what their budgets are, and where they're located, and their email address, and it gives you this, sort of on a map and by constituency. So, you can find all of these allies and work together with them. The same is true for many other kinds of organization. So, I think that's sort of the key thing. In terms of you as an individual, if you're sort of thinking about how you can help, how you can help this situation, I think, it's important to remember, you're not the only person in the country who's trying to do this. So, which is good. And doesn't mean that you shouldn't do anything, but you have to sort of figure out ways to work together at scale. And there's sort of, two obvious things you can do. Three. One is you can help people in your community, with sort of basic digital literacy. You can help them get a hold of commodity hardware. So, there are very, very good phones and laptops which are very cheap now. And I think it is something, possible within the labor movement to more or less give one of these to anyone who needs one. And certainly anyone who's sort of helping to do this kind of work, and also help them get up to speed with sort of core tools of activism, which is more or less WhatsApp, Google Docs, and Zoom. If everyone can use WhatsApp, Google Docs, and Zoom, we've really taken a big step forward in terms of just getting people in the right place and sort of knowing the things they need to know. And then there's obviously a whole universe of other more specialist tools, but if everyone can use WhatsApp, Google Docs, or Zoom, we're doing pretty good. I see something in the comments that, there are open source alternatives, but in sometimes you have to be a bit tactical about things. So, you can sort of do that. You can help any organizations at a local level get up to speed with the technology they may want to use. Again, both your CLP and any other things, local charities and stuff like that. And then at a sort of a system level, I think there are two key things to think about. One is the supply of talent. So, in this system as a whole, there are 1 million organizations, and there are 50,000 people who have the skills to help them. And somehow we need to make sure people sort of find their way, and also attract people who might otherwise be working in perhaps a more lucrative commercial job to go and instead find a job with their local charity at a bit of a discount, but they can have much more impact that way. And a big part of this is actually just not being aware of where these jobs are found. But that will help a lot. The second thing is also somewhat sort of a philosophical point, which is if we have all of these organizations of different kinds across this country and in fact worldwide starting to serve sort of digital services, this allows for things to be sort of arranged in a different way. And in particular, it allows organizations to sort of specialize much more than they could before. So, before when sort of somehow your sort of reach was limited, you had to sort of think mostly on a sort of local or regional level, and you try and provide, sort of a suite of services for that area. But instead, when things start being able to be delivered digitally, we can think about, to take for example, something like legal advice. There are maybe 500 lawyers in the country who provide legal advice to, sort of community cases. And at the moment, they don't particularly do any kind of specialization, or they mostly sort of serve their local communities. But now that we have technology and people are increasingly having a lot of access to it, you can start having a much greater degree of specialization and load balancing between these this sort of like resource. So when you're trying to think, sort of how can I help? It's also useful to think, how can I specialize in something very specific that can then serve, the whole country, or perhaps, if you've come up with a really good idea, something that can be, the whole world. And also at the same time, looking at what services are being provided elsewhere that could very specifically solve your problem. And this is quite a painful process, and discovering and being discovered when you offer, sort of an abstract service which can scale is difficult. And I think it's one way of sort of conceptualizing the challenge of this next sort of phase of transformation, which is, we suddenly have a lot of people in a lot of places who can all help. And what does that look like? Rather than, somehow our local things, which can help at a local level, which, and then they have to supply a lot more, but at least they're easy to find. So that's somehow at a high level, I think, what this challenge is right now. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ed, and Gemma as well. Really interesting to hear what you're talking about as individuals, what we can do, and the kind of actions we can take. I noticed there's definitely someone who's paid by Telegram to promote Telegram in the comments. Yeah, there are loads of other options.
I mean, Telegram is great. It's much better than WhatsApp, but unfortunately, people just won't be on it, right? And I think that's the trade-off here is it's much better to have technology that people use as opposed to technology that people don't use.
Definitely.
And I think when you're really like trying to achieve things, you just have to like go where the people are.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think one of the things I was going to say on that point is I agree with regards to Telegram, although I'm struggling just to get people on WhatsApp in the first place. So getting people to use a new service that there are less people on. And I suppose some of the other questions come up, which you mentioned at the beginning of your talk about, capitalism, who owns these companies, who owns these applications. So WhatsApp, who owns that? Facebook, Instagram, Facebook. Well, Facebook is Facebook, and so forth. It keeps going, the different platforms that these companies own. So thanks, guys, for just giving us a bit more information about the stuff you've been involved in and some of the actions. Right now, currently, when we look at digital in regards to political campaigning, there's a larger audience for Labour and more so the left online. The right have a growing audience, but they are effective in using tech to influence voters and mobilize at the ballot box, which clearly in 2019 and in years before, we failed to do that. We failed to get those numbers at the ballot box. But if you look online at some of the more left-orientated content that is available, especially some of the accounts, they have the largest followings, they have the widest reach, and what I want to understand from you guys and your understanding is, what are the defining differences between the left and the right, and how we use it and how we achieve our long-term goals, whether that is electoral victory or starting to make changes within society. I know I'll start with Gemma, because I know you were talking about moving away from clicktivism, which we all love some clicktivism. I remember that thing. I think it was called Thunder Wave or something, where you got everyone to tweet something at the exact same time. But what I always wondered to myself, what effect does that have on the real world? Just because 10 million people tweeted the same message, it doesn't mean that we're going to get a new prime minister, or that we're going to start to see some real environmental changes made in Parliament. So what are your thoughts on that, Gemma?
Yeah, I mean, looking at it in terms of the election, oh God, there's been so much kind of reflection and like licking our wounds and everything. So I don't want to go too much into talking about that. I guess, though, there are a couple of different sides to it. I think on one hand, like in a way, the Tories maybe had a bit better digital strategy and were maybe a bit like had less qualms about kind of really using data. I feel like the left kind of, for very good reasons, like have ethical concerns and like, data is often kind of framed in this like very creepy way. Whereas like the Tories, during the campaign, they really like collected loads of data on their voters or potential voters, like did really, really granular audience segmentation, held focus groups to confirm their hypotheses, and had really targeted ads and stuff. So I think there's something in that of just like, I guess, absolutely like embracing digital as a tool and like having a strategy and a way to like implement it. I guess when you look at it in terms of the wider left, I think there's this maybe, I guess like what you see, especially maybe with Twitter, is like that there's loads of different like sub-segments of the left, and it becomes like a very, very big part of their identity is how they kind of present in these kind of spaces and, speaking the code and like kind of maybe sometimes destroying each other on like very tiny details, which I think the right, I don't know from firsthand experience, but like maybe have much less like qualms about like minute differences in like tactics or theories of change or anything like that. They just like care about power. And yeah, I guess that can be part of it as well.
Yeah, I definitely do think the Tories care less in general about anything that they do. If it does go wrong, we'll fix it later. If we're in power, then we don't need to worry about it at all. Ed, what do you think about the differences in how we use technology to actually, number one, electoral victory, but actually bring about real world change?
So, of course, as a researcher, I'm fastidiously politically neutral, as you can tell by the fact that I'm talking at this conference. But I think, somehow, if you want to look at sort of, left-leaning social media dominance, you want to look at things like, look to the US, look at things like Chapo Trap House and stuff, which are very, very successful, and I think, don't necessarily make sense in the political context in the UK, but maybe give some kind of an idea of what sort of a platform like that could look like here. But more than that, I would say, thinking about social media too much is bad for you, or rather bad for you as a campaigner. And really, I think it's important both sort of strategically and in terms of how much influence it has in terms of electoral outcomes is far overstated, and much better to do is focus on. I mean, if you want to think about it that way. Think of the hundreds of thousands of charities in this country and help them all have good social media. Because they're going to reach into many, many, many different communities in all different places, and getting them from 0 to 1 is pretty easy. Whereas thinking about trying to create like a small number of sort of messaging powerhouses that somehow smash over the other side is really, I think actually a waste of energy in comparison. Whereas if every single time they come into contact with anyone who actually wants to help them and make their lives better, they get a political message. That's probably a much better use of time. And particularly, now we're talking to a widespread audience. It's something that you can do as opposed to wishing someone else was going to do.
Yeah, I agree with you definitely that when thinking specifically about the real world change you can make, if you're thinking about the kind of organizations that are actually doing stuff in the real world and how you can help them, that's you can have a massive impact on the world around us. And now going back earlier to, I mentioned about Facebook, they own Instagram, they own WhatsApp and so forth. They're generally the big tech companies aren't really trusted by a lot of people, yet attracting people to smaller independent platforms for networking, organizing, and sharing information, as we were talking about earlier in the comments. And I think it was Crassius, I wasn't trying to call you out there, I just brilliant the way that you were a sponsor for them, but an unofficial sponsor. But you know, how do you guys think we can develop online spaces that overcome these challenges? How do we bring people together without having to give in to those big capitalist organizations? Do we just use their platforms to our advantage, or should we start looking at ways in which we can create our own spaces online? Whoever wants to go first on that one, because I think you've both got very interesting backgrounds in this.
I mean, if I may, you know, the thing about sorry, my dog's here. The thing about these platforms is much like the way that junk food is more tasty. They're probably going to be less fun, at least to begin with. So you know, I would say like, don't get too hung up on it. Use whatever's easiest and gets you to your goal in the first instance, but also, you know, keep an eye on what else is available and be willing to experiment, because you know, the worst that you can do is you know, have to try again. But the best thing you can do is maybe find something that you know, really helps. And I would say something that is really important is, if you find you know, sort of independent technology that you you know, that you find important, you should support it, because no one else is.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. Like, I agree with what you said before about you have to go where the people are. As much as I love the kind of decentralized web movement, and we definitely kind of promote open source tools to as many people as we can. At the end of the day, like, I think, yeah, as you said, Dan, it's better to kind of build upon, like, go to where they are, build upon the things that are there, rather than trying to kind of convince everyone to move to a completely new space. Because a lot of the time, I guess, if you do set up a new space, you are often only talking then to like a very, very niche group of people that want to like download a new app, which is an incredibly hard thing to convince people to do. And yeah, basically, I guess it's encouraging like even more bubbles in a way. So yeah, I guess in general, we encourage people to like use existing spaces, but make sure that like you can kind of, yeah, shape them to your needs, make sure they're safe, well maintained, like they have a good culture, etc.
Brilliant. There's a question from Smash Report for Gemma. You mentioned using these social media platforms to make politics happen rather than as an echo chamber. How do you propose we do this or increase our reach?
I guess one side of it is about like definitely being on these platforms, but maybe instead of like just broadcasting, it's about listening. It's also like, yeah, I guess building relationships. I think the thing is like, in some ways it's a little bit weird these days to think about these like platforms or online spaces as like really like a digital tech thing, because they really are just like a normal social space, especially with coronavirus time, like the equivalent to any other kind of physical space that we'd be in. And like, so in the same way as you would in a physical space, you can like find people, build relationships with them, like make communities, etc. And then, yeah, I guess it depends on the activism, but basically question mark, make change.
That's totally understandable. And what you said there about listening, I think it's very important to think about the things we do in real life as well when digital organizing. And listening is a fundamental part of any type of, especially community organizing, and having those conversations with people where you're the one doing the least talking.
Can I reply to a comment?
Yeah, go for it, man.
if you're annoyed with WhatsApp, but you recognize that it's hard to get away from, you should look at Matrix, which has a WhatsApp bridge. So it's open source software that can interact with WhatsApp and allow you to basically allow people to use WhatsApp to integrate with you, but then you can use open source software to. So that solves both problems. There you go. Sorry, carry on.
This is like
the detail.
We're fans of Matrix as well. We've not had a chance yet to properly use it, but it does look cool. It doesn't solve the kind of total encryption thing. Like at the end of the day, some people are still using WhatsApp, but it's definitely a step in the right direction because you can use so many different platforms with it.
For most places, for most situations, encryption isn't very important. It's like it's sort of a slightly, a contrarian view from me, but I think I've seen a lot of people waste a lot of time trying to be very secret about things that aren't very secret.
Mm.
This is fantastic. This is like a dream for me, just sitting on a live stream with a couple of techies, talking tech stuff and learning new things. Now, for me, a digital future includes robots and technology taking on low-paid work, people being paid in cryptocurrency and using community-owned banks while our education system is online but integrated into reality. And I could go on and on and on. But I'd love to hear your views on how we should be thinking about how technology should be integrated into the ideas we have for what a socialist future looks like. I know you need to be impartial, Ed, but if you were to imagine a socialist future using technology, and specifically here, I'm thinking about a lot of us as activists, we want to try and influence government policies. And I remember back, I use this a lot. So any of my friends watching have probably heard this before, but I remember, I think it was Chris Grayling talking a couple of years ago about the fact that he's seen these driverless cars in San Francisco or something. And he was amazed. He was like, this is brand new technology. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, no, it's not. They've been working on this for like, I don't know how long. And our governments, like the people in power, I've mentioned it already, they just have no idea. So what are the kind of things we should be doing really? Or what are the ideas that we should be trying to put forward, do you think, to try and build that brighter future and transform the world in the way that we wish to see it? So Gemma, if you want to go ahead with this one.
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, I think this is a really interesting question. I think that because like what Ed said before, most tech is made like in the context of capitalism. It's actually kind of hard to imagine it outside of that. A lot of the time, it's like that classic oft quoted William Gibson thing, like the future is here, it's just unevenly distributed. So part of it, I think, is like, it will look like what it is for rich people, which is like, it's not a kind of tool of surveillance and it's actually much more in the background, I think, like not in your face. And then I think aside from that, so I'm a big like science fiction fan, particularly Ursula Le Guin. And I always kind of refer to The Dispossessed when I'm kind of thinking of like, okay, what would my socialist or anarchist future look like, utopia look like? I think the interesting thing with The Dispossessed, everyone read it if you haven't, is that it definitely doesn't come across as high tech and definitely not rich in resources, which I think is very important for us to consider thinking about the future and, of course, climate change. So it feels much more like people have made an active choice where tech should come into their life. So there is stuff where like technology is kind of used as like this cyber sin, like distribution of like where people go and like occasionally work. Although most of their life, they like do as little work as possible. There's like a great line in it where it's kind of like, they don't actually have a difference between the words play and work. And like anything that's like not fun is called drudgery, whereas work is more like play for them. And I think like, for me, this is a really good example of like what tech can do in its best possible form. I think a lot of the time, like, you know, in the book, it's just an enabler to like have people spend time together and basically live in a society where there isn't like money and you're doing things for fun and you have dignity. But yeah, that's what I'd say.
Brilliant. Go ahead, Ed.
That was quite a question. You know, I think there's a sort of like an infrastructure part of it, and there's kind of a policy part of it. And so, you know, sort of for the policy part, we just have to make sure that civil society is strong, right? I mean, you know, policy has a lot of questions, and often technology is fundamentally sort of a red herring. It just takes existing issues and kind of like, you know, kind of rearranges them a bit, and then you just have to make sure that, you know, the people working in the whatever conservation organization, you know, that's trying to save the environment can use the data that they have available. And then, you know, sort of have the skills they need to advocate for whatever they're trying to advocate for. And, you know, I really like to think of, you know, policy fundamentally. Policy is like a broad ranging process that has like infinite corners, right? And there are many organizations that try and fill these corners. And you have to make sure that they have the skills that they need. You can think of policy as sort of the output of a process, right? And so that's the policy side. In terms of infrastructure, you know, I talked about, you know, this idea that you can sort of have public interest technology. And then largely, I think this stuff doesn't exist. You know, we have some. And you know, even worse, a lot of the stuff that we have is sort of designed to look like the capitalist stuff is just not owned by Americans. And that's, you know, that's a good start, but it doesn't really, you know, create a new universe that we can live in that doesn't look the same. So, you know, the difficulty there is you sort of need a whole lot of very smart people to work for not very much money to make things that the public needs. But luckily we have those, and we call them, you know, academics. So frankly, you know, my answer to this is we should get academics and bully them into making software as opposed to writing papers that no one reads. Which again is a rather contrarian opinion.
That's why I got you guys on the call, because I wanted your opinions. We've got another question that's come in from the chat. And every time I pick up my phone, it reorientates. So I'm just going to find it. But it is from Will Brindley, I think was the name, or Bindley, sorry. Question on visual literacy. With Trump tweeting low-res screenshots of USA flags versus polished graphics, especially from the Clinton campaign or Biden campaign, I imagine, and the screenshots ultimately winning, what can we learn from this? Now, just to add my own comment on this, I'm not sure what the level of language that we're allowed to use here, so I'll call it crap. But crap posting, you know what I mean, is one of my favorite things. I have a WhatsApp group just for crap memes, and there is no rules on the level of quality to your memes. And I always think that the best memes look like they're the worst made ones. On many campaigns that I've been involved with, we've often said, you know, let's not, if we're going to do those kind of memes, we don't have a lowest standard. It just, you know, I don't mean attacking people, I mean as in the quality of the memes. And I definitely think they work. I think people appreciate it. I know from the stuff that my daughter's into, the stuff you see on TikTok, like the quality of sound on some of the TikToks just infuriates me, but I know there's a reason behind that. So in regards to the question that's asked there, I've rambled a bit, so I'll just ask the last bit is, you know, in regards to the difference, what can we best learn from the quality that we are putting there out online? Should we be thinking about making sure that things are pristine? Gemma, go ahead. Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to go in an order.
Yeah, I think there's two sides to it. On one side you have like the memes or whatever, and like there is definitely like a less polished aesthetic that gives it legitimacy, also with like social platforms. I think on the other side, there's kind of like thinking of this from like with my kind of graphic designer hat on, I think that there's like, if you think about fake news or whatever, like that you can like apply a high level of visual polish to make something, seem more legitimate and kind of like, you know, spread disinformation, etc. So I guess you have kind of two ends of the spectrum. One's to like misinform people, and the other is just to become viral and to have people share it. And I think that it's really hard though, like where basically, you know, when you're scrolling through Twitter, you don't have a lot of time. You take things on face value. You don't have time to deconstruct everything that you see. And I'm sure all of us kind of get like sucked into something that is completely not true sometimes. I don't know if that answers any question.
Yeah. So no, It's definitely, and I think also on the point of like these memes, because it has become so mainstream, looking at terribly made memes or low resolution, it's easier for disinformation to spread in the way that you're talking about. You're getting sucked into, and so forth, and that's a part of this, the whole anti 5G thing and all that. Ed, any comments?
I mean, my first comment will always be, stop worrying about social media. It's not important, or at least it's not as important as everyone thinks it is. And spend that time doing something else. But which isn't to say, I like social, but I mean, from a sort of political activism perspective. But I think this is a wrong frame of the question. Like, people recognize value. You're never going to be a Marvel movie, right? So just like, why don't you try and put things on social media which are useful to people? And that's not about being expensive. That's just about producing things that are useful. Like how are you gonna improve people's lives today, right? And I think that's something that's much better to think about than sort of like, how can you what's a good riposte, or sort of like, how can we show pictures of happy people waving? I mean, it's just irrelevant. No one cares about that. And particularly, actually, so you talked about deep fakes, right? Not deep fakes, like fake news. And people are really sort of wringing their hands about deep fake, which is really the fact you can create really realistic, videos of people saying whatever you like. And they're very worried about this. But, the most successful things like that would just, some pieces of fake news were just things that, mocked up screenshots of WhatsApp messages and things like that, which made it look like people were saying things they didn't say. And these aren't expensive to make. Anyone can make these in 10 minutes. It's more about being smart rather than being expensive.
Yeah, definitely. Like one of the oldest ones, similar to the WhatsApp messages, is the fake tube sign. So it's so easy. There's a million websites out there that you type in a bit of text and it puts it on one of those tube signs. And I've done it before, like for political reasons, where you put it up there, and there's always one person who's like, that's not real, for whatever reason. And it is smart. And I think there is a culture here as well in some of the education you're talking about. And I think in the comments, a few people have mentioned it's about the way in which we're teaching people about how to use technology. Look out for these things and actually understand them. Think about what you're consuming before you start repeating it, which perfectly moves on to my next question, where in today's society, we've seen too often the conspiracies that 5G is dangerous, a cashless society is a part of a plan to control us. And I remember, when they told us that mobile phones or computers will turn us into zombies. Let's not get into mobile phones turning us into zombies, but you know what I mean. But more importantly, like, what are the cultural changes needed to easily rebuttal these conspiracies and start a healthier conversation about how we can use technology to our benefit, especially when thinking about the kind of world we want to live in? So going off the questions that I've already asked and the things that you guys have spoken about, I feel that more people think that 5G is dangerous than there are people who actually understand what 5G is. And what are the things that you think, you may not know the answer to this one, but that we can do as people who are politically aware and also into tech to rebuttal those kind of arguments and start taking away the conspiracies against technology so that more people start embracing it rather than fearing it? I'll start with Ed this time.
Please, can I? Yeah. So oh God, I'm forced into annoying conversations about this all the time. And I think people really, so there's a very big, let's say, trend or practice or thing that people like doing, which is when they see people talking about things that aren't true, they think they can change their minds by telling them things that are true. But the fact that there are people who go and convince themselves of falsehoods, the solution to this is not more facts. Right, like more facts will not solve that. Number one, right? So don't think if you put something online that rebuts something, it's going to affect anything. And now, when you think about people out in the world believing falsehoods, first of all, you have to think about why that upsets you, right? Because it turns out forever people have believed falsehoods, and somehow we're just somehow a bit more aware of it for whatever reason. And in the general sort of way you talk about this is about information environments. There's one very important thing, which is people who make very significant decisions that affect a lot of people, like policymakers, for example, have correct information and come to correct conclusions. And you can do that because they tend to be a bit more discoverable and accessible and convincible. So that's something you can definitely do. Alternatively, you can try and make sure that people who sort of don't believe in sensible things don't get into those positions. That's like sort of ideal. But if you are stuck in a situation where you're trying to argue with someone who believes any of your examples, much better is this is something the right has learned very well, is the dead cat strategy, which is talk about something else. Right? People believe this stuff because somehow they don't have anything else to do. And what's much better is, you sort of help them in their lives and help them, give them something else to worry about that isn't this. And arguing them is just getting into sort of like a practice which they enjoy, which has brought them to where they are. So, don't engage, or at least engage in a different way.
The way I've engaged is I've changed my Wi-Fi router name to 5G COVID test mast, and all the people who have the notifications on a new Wi-Fi device nearby that walk past my house, I see them looking and panicking, and it's fantastic because they're normally the ones who are into that stuff. But you're definitely right, Ed. I agree with a lot of that. Gemma, have you got anything to say on that?
Yeah, I think definitely this kind of taking a different approach is an important one. I think that a lot of the time conspiracies, it will be based in something, right? So kind of completely dismissing it will maybe also ignore the root cause. I think it's there has to be kind of an element of empathy as well, and kind of understand that it probably comes from someplace. And the example that I always kind of use is the story of the Luddites. So it's used as kind of insult if you refuse to use technology or whatever. But if you look at the history of it, this group called the Luddites were not anti-technology because it was technology. They were anti-technology because it was going to lead to exploitation and loss of work for workers. So a lot of the time there is a reason to be worried about these things, and that there's been plenty of situations where tech has been used for not so good purposes or whatever. So I think it's kind of, again, it's this thing about listening to people, kind of understanding it. And yeah, I agree, the answer is not more facts, but kind of maybe trying to see that viewpoint, as long as it's not an absolutely wildly right-wing viewpoint, I guess. And then kind of understand, what does this mean in more of a social context? What is this person kind of trying to say?
Thank you so much, guys. We've got a brilliant question from, and I should have asked this one earlier, really, Eric Hughes. Could you all give us your favorite piece of tech or software for organizing that we might not know about? So I think you did one earlier, Ed, but you can do another one. Gemma, is there any great tech out there that you're using at the moment?
I mean, Signal, the messaging app, is always the one, our favorite, because it's super secure. It's open source. It's really well designed and everything. They even have stickers now. So yeah, it's probably the one I recommend.
Ed, what's your favorite piece of tech right now?
Ooh. This is in some ways my special subject, so it's for. Well, I mean, ironically, the thing I was really liked for a long time is something for organizing events. So that's somehow not even cares now. I think. Okay, like always, first thing I would say is use things that people know. Google Docs is amazing, but in spite of sort of you don't want to know that. So I would say wiki surveys are cool. Check out allarideas.org is pretty cool. What else? There's some Gived it has some cool tools. GIVED has some cool fundraising tools which are interesting. And also, okay, a little plug for myself. So I'm working on a piece of organizing software which is called Docs Plus, which hasn't launched yet, so you can't use it. But you'll probably get to hear about it quite a lot in a few months. So if you go to docs.plus, you can see a page that isn't very helpful. But one day, one day it'll be something you can use.
Brilliant. Well, mine, to be honest, I'm because of COVID and the lockdown, I'm learning how to start using my camera equipment in a totally different way. So I'm learning how to use OBS, not just for screen recording Netflix, that if it's allowed. But yeah, OBS is a cool piece of software that you can do a lot with when it comes to streaming, content creation, if you're into YouTube and making a lot of video stuff. So yeah, that's and it's open source, so there's a lot of things that you can do with it. But to be honest, I'm more of a consumer of tech rather than a creator. So this is why this is like a dream for me, sitting with Gemma and Ed, just talking tech all evening, which I could go on for ages. I think there is one more question. Mark, would you mind just putting it on the screen for us? Because I've disorientated my phone and I can't get back to the comments. Have you got it, Mark? Yeah. How do you set up basic organizing tools, culture, etc., with a new group of people that have come together to do something? So, so how do you set up basic organizing tools, culture? Yeah, I'm not quite sure I totally understand that question, but I think one of the first things you've got to do is a bit of an audit, because in my day job, I do a bit of organizing. And the first thing you've got to do is a bit of an audit on your team, find out where people are at, and make sure that you, in regards to culture, set boundaries. Messages after 10 p.m., are they acceptable? Make sure that your core group, the people that you're organizing with, that they're up for that. You've got those boundaries, and you definitely have a disputes process. One of the big things that one of my colleagues taught me is that, and in a lot of things, is just because you're online doesn't mean that you need to resolve it there and then if there's an issue. Sometimes you need to take a step back, have a think about it, and come back to it. And when I talk about having an audit, I would say think about the digital literacy of the people that you're working with. Some people they may use WhatsApp, but they may not know that they can have it on a desktop and that you can share files and so forth. And some people might be on a pay-as-you-go phone and not have unlimited data like you do. So that's some of my tips, if I may step on your toes, comrades. But Gemma, what would you say in answer to that question?
Yeah, I think definitely kind of working out, okay, what tools do we actually need? A lot of the time when we're working with groups, we'll just have like an initial meeting and kind of like understand like, okay, what are the very basics of this? I think also, yeah, kind of setting like a standard of using it. I put in the private chat here, there's like you have to register, unfortunately, like it's behind harvesting your email, but another acronym put together, like a kind of digital tools for activism list, which can be quite good because it like compares the various tools that are out there across various matrices. Yeah, I think that's it for now. Ed?
I shared a whole bunch of tools in the chat if someone can do that for me. Sorry, that's kind of answering the last question. Okay, I mean, it depends what you're trying to do. I mean, I think the problem with a lot of activism is in practice, it's sort of, a lot of people start doing activism without really any idea of what they're trying to do. And they just kind of get people together with no real goal. And then it sort of turns into more like a sort of cultural activity rather than something with a sort of outcome that's aimed at. You know, a lot of the problems, like toxic behavior and burnout and stuff, happen in situations where there's no purpose. So you know, just sort of be aware of that. Like the worst community is the one where it's just sort of people hanging out. You know, and if you really have a like a service you're trying to do or something you're trying to achieve, then you know, the technology depends on what you're trying to do. So you know, in a sense, there's not really an answer to that. And I tend to find there are like many questions come up which are actually just reflections on the fact that like somehow the mission is not stated well. Like things like we should have a website and let's spend a lot of time trying to decide what to put on our website. Is somehow like a classic. Activist groups will sort of form and then spend a year trying to figure out what's on their website, and it's just sort of a massive waste of time and energy. And it points to the fact that probably like somehow that energy is better focused elsewhere. So again, I would say, rather than form an activist group, why don't you go and find a charity and help them because they really, really, really need you. Where and they know exactly what they need you to do. Whereas trying to sort of like do direction setting in a group that's sort of randomly assembled is very, very difficult.
Yeah, I think I would add to that. I added another link in the chat. One thing that I always reference, it's very old now, but the text tyranny of structurelessness, and like how important it is kind of like define these structures, because otherwise like unintended structures will form. So in a way, like that is more important, than the digital tool themselves. I guess, like speaking about like, oh, do we need a website or not? It's the same as like what we were saying before, in that like it should just be where are the people that we want to organize or be part of, and then go to those spaces.
I like that a lot. Well, guys, thank you so much. Like I'm here every Friday in my office if you want to just hang out and tell me more about the stuff that you're working on, because it's so cool. I love it, honestly. And like I say, I'm a consumer of technology. So when you guys make anything cool, please do send it over. I will definitely be sharing it amongst my circles. And I can't wait for Ed, the project you're working on at the moment. I can't wait for that to be finished. I've got a few ideas of what I could do with that. So yeah, that's the end of the session. I really appreciate Gemma, Ed, Newspeak House, and Common Knowledge. Obviously, got to shout out the organizations. Have I missed any organizations?
UVW,
DCW. Hey, come on. So big up the organizations, big up the people, big up the viewers. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. And if you're watching this on, I was going to say on repeat, Dave +1, but no, you know what I mean. If you're watching the recording of it, then thank you for watching it back. I've got a couple of quick announcements to make. First of all, one close to my heart. I just want to send some special love. I doubt they'll be watching this right now, but to the O'Brien family. There's one of the oldest members of Bootle Labour Party where I live, sadly passed away today, and I send all of my love to you and your family. A fantastic person, so I believe you deserve that respect. And then here's to the less important stuff, but definitely worth you checking out. We want to continue these discussions, so we have dedicated spaces on our community forum. I believe Mark will be sharing a link to this. If you've already set up your account, you can click this link that should be posted in the chat to find the relevant discussion thread to this event or any other discussions that are on there. And if you're registered for the festival, check your email for your sign-up link to the forum. If you're unable to find a sign-up link, please email info@theworldtransformed.org. Also, don't forget to register for other events. There are loads of events at TWT20. I don't know how we've gone from in January to organising a real life festival in Liverpool to then being unsure of what we're going to be organising. And now our team have managed to bring together this. Every event is filling up very quickly. So make sure that you are registered for any events that you want to attend as quickly as possible, and make sure you go to theworldtransformed.org/register, and then go to the individual event you would like to register for on the program. Finally, last but not least, most importantly, if you've enjoyed this session or any of the other sessions and would like to help us sustain our work through this festival and beyond, watch this space. There is so much to come, trust me. Please consider supporting us at theworldtransformed.org/support. Again, big thank you to the viewers, Ed, Gemma, Rory and Mark on tech. I have had one of the best Friday nights in a while. So thank you very much, everyone. I hope you enjoy your weekends. Peace, love, solidarity.
Bye.
View the full TWT20 programme and become a supporter today to help us deliver political education all year round at theworldtransformed.org.